This is GovExec Daily, where we bring you the federal stories that really matter. It's August 10th, 2022. I'm Ross John Fortuna. According to the Department of Justice, the percentage of women in law enforcement jobs has remained stagnant for decades, hovering around 10 to 15% of total officers. For federal law enforcement positions, that number is approximately the same, with 13% of the total being women. Recently, GovExec correspondent and frequent GovExec Daily guest Courtney Bublé interviewed Cathy Sanz, president of the group Women in Federal Law Enforcement, about issues in federal policing. After a short message, you'll hear her interview with Sanz on how she sees the problem framed and how it can be ameliorated.
GmarkU, a collaborative community-based platform for knowledge sharing and skills development. Bringing you together at cutting-edge, highly interactive events, including our premier conference, GAIN. Grow, accelerate, innovate, and network. Join the marketplace of knowledge. Learn, connect, insights at gmarku.com.
Please, to start, give an overview of the organization and how you got involved with it. That would be great.
Well, the organization actually started back in about 1978 as an OPM task force. Mm-hmm. Women had been barred from being hired as law enforcement officers prior to 1971. So in 1969, President Nixon signed an executive order, and the first women were hired in 71 and 72. So the OPM task force was designed to look at how do we recruit, retain, promote, and just plain get more women into the federal law enforcement sector. Mm-hmm. Then, as often happens in the government, the task force became an interagency committee. Mm-hmm. And it was housed between the Justice and Treasury departments where most of the law enforcement agencies were. And it was called the Interagency Committee, so it became IC Wiffle. And that's where the first annual training conferences were developed and held. And the first time women in federal law enforcement started getting recognized for their contributions to the field. We stayed as an interagency committee until about 1999, mm-hmm. when we left the government and stepped out as a nonprofit organization. And we actually had a group of women sit around a kitchen table, pool their money, and they stood up the nonprofit. Wow. And so we're into our 22nd year as a nonprofit organization, and we have successfully held leadership training every year since then, mm-hmm. plus an awards program. We have also instituted a scholarship program, so that young women looking for a career in the criminal justice field, they don't have to just be law enforcement officers.
Mm. Got it, great. And then how did you get involved with it?
Well, I got involved because my boss assigned me. Mm-hmm. Said, get over to Wiffle and help them and do the agency proud. I won't tell you what she really said because it's not you can't publish it. But and that's basically how I became the agency representative to the organization for the Customs Service, and I've been with them in some capacity since that time, since about 1998, I think. Mm. Wow. So I've held a number of positions on the executive committee when I was still in the government. And then when I retired, I have served on the board. I became the vice president for a very short time. And then I've been the president for almost 10 years now.
Wow. Do you have any numbers on the current state of women in federal law enforcement agencies? And if so, do you have any numbers on how that's, or idea of how that's changed over the years?
Yes, we do
Any
keep
statistics?
track.
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
We know that currently it's about 13.1%. And that is down from 16.4.
And when was that, the 16.4?
16.4 was the 2008 figures, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Every 4 years, the Justice Department had been counting the women in the agencies. Of course, now that's also voluntary. So many agencies didn't report. Mm-hmm. So the figure is estimated on the total number that are that do the reporting. It's kind of dismal. There hasn't been a lot of progress. Even in the state and local arena, it's at 12%, and it's been at 12% since 2007. Mm. And we've also seen that trend amongst the minority groups also. So when you look at Black and African American officers, they're at 12%. Hispanic officers are about the same percentage. Women are the same. And it just hasn't moved since 2007. While we might be a little bit higher, we pretty much mirror what's going on in the profession.
Got it. So why do you think that there has been this decrease in the last however many years? Like, do you have any specific factors you could point to?
On the federal side, the way we hire, we have these huge hiring frenzies because of politics and budgets. And then there's a surge, and then the politics change, and so does the appropriation of that agency. Mm. So you go into these big swings, these big highs and lows. You get a lot of freezes. And so when you don't have consistent hiring, you get these huge valleys. And so what may happen is you have, this big uptick of minority candidates, and they get up to the top, and everybody thinks, oh, great, we've done such a fantastic job in creating diversity. And then in 2 or 3 years, they're all retired. Hmm. And because you had been at a very low par after you had initially hired that crew, then you sweep back down, and it's like you never did anything. It's you start all over again. So that's a continuing issue, and we just don't do a good job at recruiting.
And what about retention, in addition to recruiting and hiring? Possibly discrimination that women face in the workforce, or harassment. Do you think that could also be an issue? Why the numbers are so low for women?
It can be. It's we see fluctuations in it. You have, I'm just sitting in different agencies are popping through my head. And so there's no one window. Everybody handles things differently. Mm-hmm. Some of the biggest issues that we see, and we actually did a study a long time ago on why women stay. And one, they stay because they're not going to let the men win. They knew they were being discriminated against. They knew they weren't being integrated, and they just refused to quit. But when they do decide to go, interestingly enough, people think that women leave more often than men do. And actually, men and women leave their jobs at about the same rate in law enforcement, and for the same reasons. And one of the highest reasons for leaving is just plain poor supervision and management. Everybody thinks, oh, it's family and things like that. Yes, they do leave for those reasons. But universal, that's one of the biggest reasons people leave. And they just go to another agency. You know, one of the benefits in the federal sector is, for example, when you're a special agent, well, there's a lot of agencies with special agents. And so you can just transfer to another agency. So you can find somebody that meets your needs. I mean, when we started and we were all 21, 22 years old, we could do anything and go anywhere. And then when we all become 28 or 30 years old, we suddenly are all married and we have kids and we have all these other issues that are starting to pop up. The agency never changes. The agency wants you to be where it wants you to be. And sometimes you just can't do it. And so the alternative is you go find another agency.
Got it. And I'd love to hear about some of the programs that your organization offers your mentors and any other type of resources to help women in law enforcement agencies.
Well, the first thing is we're an education foundation as a nonprofit. So we do get limited in some of the things that we can do. So we can't go advocate on the Hill. We can't lobby, that type of thing. And so we also can't represent our membership in any action. You know, we can't defend them or anything like that. What we do is we have relationships with other organizations or entities, law firms, and that can provide them that type of help, the direct help. Our annual leadership training focuses on helping women develop the skills that they need in order to assume higher positions within their agencies. Part of that training also includes the cutting edge law enforcement things. You can't lead your agency if you don't understand what your job is. So we try to keep people abreast of what's going on in the profession. And then we also focus a section of our training on you and your career. And that goes from everything from preparing for retirement, because especially for women, because more than likely they will have to have a second career because they're just going to live that long. And so preparing to move from the government and a law enforcement position to the private sector can be quite a task for a career law enforcement officer. We provide networking events. We have a scholarship program for both members and regular students. So for our membership, they can put themselves in for a scholarship, or they can sponsor somebody. So if you had a niece, you could sponsor a niece for a scholarship. And that's for both any member. They don't have to be a gun carrier. They can be one of the support positions in a law enforcement agency, and they're welcome just as anybody else is. And then we do fundraising for our scholarship program. We have a silent auction. We have a golf tournament, which will be held in October this year out in Rehoboth Beach. And the networking and the mentoring is almost on an as-need basis, because we're still a relatively small organization. So, I don't have a couple of dozen mentors in my back pocket. So as women contact us and discuss their needs. I try to pair them with people or help them myself. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of federal resume work with people, preparing them for promotions and things like that.
Got it. So the Biden administration has put a huge emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, particularly in the federal workforce. There was that executive order that came out last year about that. I'm wondering, based off, it's only been about a year, but have you seen that to be effective so far? Or do you think that that can be effective for, what you're looking to do and your organization's mission?
Well, we've always helped the agencies. I mean, some of the, for example, when the Border Patrol did their women's only announcement, which was the first time in the federal government anybody had ever tried it, I worked with CBP and provided them with information that they needed to do the justification. And we've gone in and talked with any organization that's been looking at how to increase their recruitment and retention capabilities. What's coming down the forefront? How are things being impacted? What's been proposed, I think the agencies had until June 30th to get their paperwork in on their proposals on how they were going to meet that executive order. So it's still a little early. And so I expect to see activity bubbling up as people are trying to implement their programs, and we'll be there to support them.
Great. I just have one more question, then I'll ask you if I left anything out. What advice would you give a young woman, maybe in college or recently graduated college, who's interested in going into law enforcement, isn't sure if she wants to join the federal government, is maybe intimidated by, what she could potentially encounter working for, Secret Service, CBP, something like that. What advice would you give her?
Go for it. I mean, organizations like ours, you can contact us and we'll start walking you through the process. I've counseled a number of young women about whether or not the agency that they think they want to go to is the match for them. And that's just from experience. And then if it looks like they really want that job, we'll start putting them with people that can talk to them in depth about what is it like to be a special agent with DEA or ATF or an FBI agent, HSI, the others. And we talk very frankly about the pros and cons of the job and what's your life going to be like.
Thanks for listening to GovExec Daily. Our show was produced by Adam Butler. We want to thank Courtney Bublé for interviewing Women in Federal Law Enforcement's Cathy Sanz on the program today. Our music is the song Signals by Catfish Dancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can email us any feedback at podcast@govexec.com or hit us up on Twitter @govexec. We'd love to hear from you. We'll talk to you later.